So, Christa, tell me, where does the line get drawn between free speech and really hurting people with that speech?
The problem when we use the term free speech, we're talking about the government being able to protect someone's right to free speech, right? And so a government is the only one that can be the entity that violates that right. So here, when you're talking about private people, you have a right to say things. Who has the right to stop you? And if you have threats of physical violence, there are times when, of course, the police can become involved.
And then I think about the government getting involved in your free speech when you begin to harass someone as well. But internet harassment is kind of a new frontier. So where do we stand?
I represent a lot of people who've been the victims of bullying and harassment online. And Facebook and YouTube and the other platforms have become better at monitoring what's happening. Their algorithms are better now at detecting things where the victims of bullying and harassment don't have to be the folks that report it necessarily. So things are getting better. I think that there was a period of time where it was the wild, wild west. We're still not in a place where Facebook and Twitter are controlling and monitoring what's happening on their websites. Holding them accountable is a totally different story and a little bit more complicated.
So let's take Facebook and the platforms out of it for a moment, and let's talk about the typists. If you look at a family like Shanann Watts' family, they have been ruthlessly assailed by the power of the pen by so many people. And I wonder if that's just allowed, as awful as it is and as immoral as it is it just allowed for people to be so shamelessly evil online?
It's hard to regulate it is the issue. And can the government regulate it is the bigger issue. We try to regulate hate crimes, and oftentimes those are struck down on constitutional grounds because they violate First Amendment rights.
When Shanann's family says they're working on something called Shanann's Law, how far can a law go before it starts to impede, your right to be terrible?
We all have the right to say what we need to say, and you're right on that. And I think the problem with regulating speech is that until it crosses a line to a threat, then it really can't be regulated by the federal government. That's when you're interfering with someone's First Amendment right. And as terrible as those rights are, there's not much you can do about it. It's about protecting my rights as well. So you protect the rights of the most vile in order to protect all of our rights to do what we want to do in terms of saying our piece.
And then I also wonder how close to the line you can come with regard to defaming someone. So for instance, the Ruszczyk family, the family of Shanann Watts, if someone repeatedly says something about them that's not true, can they somehow prove that they've been defamed by it? And if someone claims that perhaps they're not the victims they say they are, or that Chris is not guilty, that then brings into question the title of victim and victim's family. And could that be considered defaming someone? It's a little complicated, and I don't know if they'd lose money, so to speak, which is really big in the definition of libeling someone, but can they be held accountable for doing something like that, claiming they're not victims?
Well, then it's, it's your reputation or your family's reputation is what they're attacking in the scenario you're giving. And there is a question of whether or not they're considered a private person or a public figure. And that makes a big difference when you are examining whether or not there's liability in these kinds of cases. You might remember the Richard Jewell case from many moons ago, the alleged Atlanta bomber. There a lot of case law flowed from that dealt with when you can defame a public or private person. Richard Jewell was made a public person.
Not by his own choice.
Right, not at all. And, others, like yourself, choose to be in a public light, right? So there's a difference in what you're doing. And so was Frank Ruszczyk choosing to be public? There could be arguments that could be made because he has been so outspoken about what his family is going through, that he has decided to become a public figure or make himself more public. And then a defamation lawsuit becomes much more difficult.
Wow. So the fact that he has been victimized once and wants to defend his dead sister and dead nieces might elevate him to a public figure where he can no longer defend himself using libel laws.
That's correct.
It seems like just a double tragedy.
It is. I don't necessarily agree with this public versus private figure. I think that we all have the right to protect our reputation and should have the same recourse regardless of what we do for a living or what kind of activists we choose to become, to defend ourselves that way, or to protect ourselves rather that way. So it is very unfortunate, but true.
What do you think the odds are that the Ruszczyk family prevails in trying to get something like Shanann's law enacted?
In Colorado, I think that they have probably a very friendly legislature that has embraced this family. So I think that they have that going for them. I think that because they're victims of crimes and now have been brutalized on top of that, that their chances become even better. When we are trying to get laws passed in Sacramento here in California, for instance, we're bringing victims to come and talk to legislators. And because they're the ones that are pushing this, not attorneys or lobbyists, I think that their chances become a little bit better. I think that they have to be really careful because of the First Amendment rights we were talking about.
Well, I wish the best for them. I just, to the trolls out there, be careful because you may end up the next online victim of bullying because of your behavior too. And God forbid you go through what you're putting these people through. Christa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ashleigh.
And Vinny, I should also mention that, Christa was very clear in saying there's the difference between criminal prosecution of what you say with your free speech protections and civil prosecution, because you may have the right to say something, but you also have to deal with the consequences of it. And while the government may not be able to lock you up for being a horrible person verbally, there are civil actions that can be taken against you. Here's the rub. What Christa says is it gets really difficult to deal with the anonymity issues, finding these trolls. They're just leeches into the, ether of society. And so they're hard to actually find. And then there's the jurisdictional problems, right? Where are they? Are they in UK? Well, good luck going after someone in Saudi Arabia or UK, or maybe we just don't even know what state they're in. So there are hurdles without question, but we're still a little in the wild, wild west in terms of really getting a handle on the damage that these people do. And P.S., who are they? Yeah. I mean, really, who are they?
Yeah. The bottom line, from my perspective, the only way you're going to stop this stuff from happening on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google, on YouTube, is to get rid of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. It's another whole conversation.
What are you
doing?
But
the immunity, the immunity that they have, makes them not care because they can't be sued.
The current president has talked a lot about that, has threatened that as well. That's a big road to hoe, as you and I know. But for the viewers out there who may not know what that section is, basically all these platforms, they're just the town square. That's kind of how the law treats them. And they have been operating that way since their inception. And more critics are saying, well, maybe they should be taking the hit on some of this. Like, for instance, Court TV, if I said something defamatory and I libeled somebody through Court TV, well, Court TV is also the publisher, right? So Court TV could be part of that. Well, these platforms, they don't suffer that same exposure.
But so they don't care. They don't care.
So
they honestly don't care. They're too busy counting all their money. That's how the companies got so big and so wealthy, because they can't be sued by lawyers like me. That's why. All right.
You're too busy to sue. You got a show to do.
Exactly. Ashleigh, thank you so much.
Okay.